all questions are out of the way, then I'm ready to start if everybody else is. All right. Cool. So I have a 7-minute speech, quick off-time roadmap. I'm going to go over some framing and then three contentions. Is anybody not ready? All right. Time starts now. My partner and I strongly affirm in the year 2021 CE, the Earth receives communication from an alien planet. Humans should not reply to these communications. Our right mechanism today will be net benefits, whoever can do the most good and the least amount of harm. Now into some definitions. So we define alien planet as a planet with extraterrestrial life, and we define communications as either purposeful or accidental exchanging of information. So basically saying where like communications could either be interpreted as intentional intentionally sent to the Earth or not intentionally sent to the Earth. Either way, our speech covers both. So let's first look at the eventuality or the scenario that these communications are intended for Earth. So if these communications are intended for Earth, we shouldn't respond. So there are two circumstances here. Either aliens are threatening and want to use superior technology to enslave us, or aliens shared their technology with us and come in peace, and we use it to kill each other. So let's look at the first circumstance, or break it down more. So aliens use superior technology and want to take over the world. So we shouldn't respond to their messages or communications because we want to give them as little as we can. So any response we send out would probably be cordial, like we'd be asking for peace talks or like some sort of like reconciliation, because obviously we don't want to like attack an alien race that we know nothing about and is probably technologically superior to us. And then also we don't want to get enslaved, so we're trying to like solve this through peace talks. So they then enter our planet. Then we probably invite them to our planet. We have peace talks. We give them a grand stage with our political leaders to demonstrate and then basically they can just demonstrate their strength and superiority. They can now kill or take hostage our world leaders because they're who are probably going to meet with these aliens. And then we as a race scramble while they pick us off using strength and superior technology, while we have effectively no leaders because the aliens like took them hostage or killed them. So then we basically. Yeah, sure.
What is the actual probability that this would happen as compared to a non-situation as you're describing?
We're going to go over that next. So like it's either or, we can't figure it out. So we're just going to look at both and see why we shouldn't send the message either way. So basically we shouldn't send this message because we Trojan horse ourselves. So we let them into our planet willingly and without a fight, and then delaying the inevitable is key, which is basically not sending them a message back. So saying like basically potential for solvency. If we don't send them a message back, it'll probably be more time before they come and attack our planet. And then we have more time to be able to prepare ourselves for that eventuality, potential for solvency. That is why we're not sending them back a message. Second scenario is that aliens share their technology with us. They come in peace. People are always inclined to weaponize this technology. So militaries will take this technology and weaponize it or these technological advancements, or we increase hostile tension among countries because now there's a whole new set of technology entered into the game from this superior and technologically advanced alien race. So responding to this message is bad because if they come in peace and basically mean they don't want to hurt us with their weapons, and we don't welcome them, then they'll probably leave because they don't want to like infuriate us, or if we're not welcoming them into our world like explicitly, they won't come to our planet, or will probably leave eventually. So them leaving means that there's no new weapon introduction, no new technology introduction, technology that can and will be weaponized, as we've seen throughout the entirety of the human race. So the impacts here, there will be a decreased arsenal of new weaponry we don't understand fully that is then used to fight each other with. Yeah.
Okay, so if they are coming in peace, why exactly would they have weapons?
Well, I mean, they'd probably just introduce new technology, and any new technology introduced to us, any new technology shared with us will then be weaponized by militaries, like the US, like China, increased fighting. So there's basically decreased ability to fight each other with new destructive weapons if we don't send back a message and they just leave. And there will be decreased chance of mutually assured destruction, like basically going out the window, because people now have bigger weapons and they can basically like potentially take out a full country like with one nuke, and then like mutually assured destruction doesn't matter anymore. Our next contention would be world crafting chaos, or is world crafting chaos. So basically, in either of these two eventualities, the world won't be able to craft a letter fast enough or a response fast enough, because every country would want to say in it. Everybody would want to like talk about this. Everybody would want to include their own special thing that they want to say to these aliens. There would be language barriers as well. So like basically coordinating a prepared response between every member of the world would just create like a massive chaos. So we won't respond fast enough, and then either the aliens leave and we lost our chance to talk with the aliens, or the aliens get angry and attack us, but we aren't really ready because we're still busy writing this letter that we're trying, or like this response that we're trying to send back to them, instead of like preparing for the worst. So the impacts here are we either see too little aliens because the aliens leave, or we see too much aliens because they attempted to overtake the world. Then also there's world chaos because everybody's trying to coordinate this letter, and we see some countries being mad because they just don't get enough to say, and then that leads to decreased world cooperation. Let's move on to our third contention of
Destruction.
Of destruction. So if the communication we receive is not intended for Earth, that means that the aliens do not know where the planet is. They simply sent out a communication hoping it would reach somebody, similar to the map NASA sent out in the 70s. If we respond in some way, it would probably be in a way where they would know our location and possibly be able to travel to us. This leads to two other possibilities. If the aliens do not care about our well-being or trading in technology, they're probably going to kill or enslave us and or steal all of our natural resources. And because in this situation they're able to travel to us, a capability we do not have currently, this is the more likely situation. I can't take it anymore, and also it's moving into protected time. This is the more likely situation because they would likely not be interested in equal trade because they're more technologically advanced than us. If the possibility of this happening far away any positive impacts of the negation could cite about any improvement in technology, because it inevitably leads to either extinction or enslavement of the entire human race, or the human race extinct or killing itself because of weaponizing technology. However, if for some reason they're interested in trading, there would be a similar situation to our first contention, because there's so little cooperation between different countries, we'd all be fighting amongst ourselves for trade with the aliens, creating further tension. Because this is such a huge change to the status quo, it is not unreasonable to think that nuke war could result, especially if the alien technology changes the mutually assured destruction we currently have that prevents nuclear warfare. Currently, if this doesn't happen, however, we would increase tensions, decreasing trade and cooperation. In both these cases, there's a huge chance of extinction, or at the very least, a lot of death, destruction, and a huge decrease in quality of life. For these reasons and more, you're clearly going to be voting in favor of the affirmation.
All right. Can you hear me well? Just making sure, because yesterday I know it was a bit like not good.
We can hear.
All right.
Yeah, we can hear.
All right. Thanks. Yeah, if it does drop down or something, or the quality goes down, please just let me know, and I'll try and stop and recollect it. And if it was like really bad, I'll just start over if that's okay with the judges. But other than that, I will just begin my first word. Hi, my name is Ron Shuja, and I'm the leader of the opposition for today's resolution. Now, although the affirmative seems to have good points, they seem to know as much about aliens as I know about talking to girls. And frankly, that isn't much. Now, first, I'm going to be going over the negations case today, and then I'm going to be looking over the affirmatives plan and seeing how exactly those fall. First, we on the side of negation agree to the idea that we should look at the net benefits that would result at either of responding to these communications or not responding to these communications. Next, let's get into the first contention of the negation. That being, they're either going to be highly developed or they're going to be wiped out by now. Let's actually look at the actual science of the situation. Earth has also put out such communication signals in the past. As quoted by my opponents, they said NASA put out a similar signal in the 70s. And yet, we also know at the same time that these signals travel extremely slowly due to the absurdly low speeds of sound and light, especially on a universal scale. Now, if we're receiving such signals from planets outside of our range of which we are able to detect them out of our observable distance, which, by the way, is galaxies away by now, that means that they must have sent these signals hundreds, if not thousands of years ago. If we can see that they were at a point at which they were at similar development to Earth, where they're able to send out such signals, in those hundreds of years, in those thousands of years since they have sent those signals, either they've continued an exponential trend of development such as Earth and approach something akin to a similarity for their own planet, where they become highly developed to the point where, as a famous quote once said, highly developed technology is akin to magic, or in the same time, they've wiped themselves out and there's nothing to worry about. So the fact is, the warrant is that either way, either you have a highly developed civilization which is going to able to just enact or act as they want without us doing anything, either way of us responding or not responding, or it's just going to be a dead planet which we have no downsides to actually communicating with. So in either way, it's out of our control. So the best we don't see any benefits by not responding. All we see is potential loss of benefits if we don't respond, because at that point there are no losses to respond, because those losses would happen either way under the assumption of a highly developed civilization. Second, the idea is that this has public point.
Yeah. So don't you agree that if they were to introduce like their new technology thousands of light years ahead of us, that we would probably attempt to weaponize it, which would probably kill us all?
Okay, I would say on the whole, no, but that's a point me and my partner will get into on when you start rebutting your speech. Now, in our contention two, the fact is that this has public support overall. In 2020, the UK SETI research group created a procedure as to how they'll deal with extraterrestrial contact. And to create this procedure, they commenced the largest ever survey on the topic of EC contact with thousands of participants. And the result was a majority of people agreeing that they wanted the importance of actually responding to such communication attempts and actually responding to them and actually talking to them. And the fact is that if we have such a fact of extraterrestrial communication, we're going to see that on a large scale, the public populace of people around the world in countries all over the place are going to be saying that we want to respond, we want to communicate back to these aliens. And that's something that if we withhold it from the people, we're going to need a very strong reason, which the government simply doesn't give a strong enough reason to actually do. Next, the idea is contingent three, that humans unify the most when there's an external group to band together against. Humans love in groups and out groups. The fact is that aliens would provide the greatest out group that we could possibly get. And who would be in that in group? All of Earth. The fact is that the idea of everyone developing more strife, developing more interrelated distrust is in chaos is something that's the exact opposite of what would happen. We would see bodies such as UN, NATO, all these organizations of supranational organizations would be communicating, talking to each other, seeing how best to help keep Earth alive. The fact is that the idea of just saying that Russia, China, all these countries are just going to militarize at the moment of this, are just going to start developing conflict, that's just fear-mongering, warmongering. The idea is that that's not what's going to happen. These people are going to see the importance of reaching out to this country, of putting this goal above their own. But in the same vein, the government, they say what's going to happen is that we're going to have these people, we're going to be spending too long researching how to contact each other, how to send this letter back to them. But one, disregarding the idea that we don't know if everyone would even have the technology to be able to send a message back to these people, or that they wouldn't just do it on their own. The fact is that, as I already said, these signals had to have come from hundreds, if not thousands of years in the past. It's okay if we take a few years to actually get our letter back. We're not going to have death just for waiting a few years to actually write our letter back. Next, our contention four is the fact is that Earth has a limited time span in the status quo. Earth is a dying planet, and at this rate, we aren't doing it any favors. Experts on climate change agree that the current rate we're living, the planet only has around 8 years until we're doing irreversible damage. Some publications are even calling it climate catastrophe at this point. Should we not look to the stars for a new planet to call home, and even open up to the idea of communicating with other planets and seeing how they deal with the problems of internal strife, global warming, and how to relocate to another planet? If the affirmative wants to talk about new technology, within the technology they need to address is the idea of having the technology to go to a new planet, to be able to help fix the problems of climate change and climate catastrophe. Our fifth and final contention is that on the whole, I'll take that point real quick.
Yeah, so how are we going to move basically the entire populace of Earth to another planet if, as you conceded, it'll take millions of years to be able to move from one planet to another, especially one that's as technologically advanced as these aliens?
Okay. I didn't say millions of years for moving. I just said the communication signal was taking hundreds of years. But continuing on the point, what I was saying is that if we did want to believe the affirmative, even at their highest ground, that this is a super or highly developed thing that is able to respond to us almost immediately or just blow us up in a few years. Fact is that in that same situation where we do have beneficial aliens, they would be able to help us relocate. Now, onto the fifth contention, the fact is that underlying their entire arguments, the AF is inherently xenophobic. Because when you actually look towards their arguments, they're all based on the idea that that these aliens are going to be the majority of the aliens, the majority of the time, are going to be warmongering, are going to be fearful. The fact is that we actually look at a statistics of probability between beneficial and hostile, and what we can actually do, what we can do. We see that on the whole, the idea of these people being warmongering and yet at the same time sending out signals into the unknown universe simply is incompatible. We don't want to support a xenophobic plan. We want to be able to accepting these new cultures. We want to be able to interact with these new cultures, have an expansion of the marketplace of ideas. We want to be able to communicate with new people. Now, real quick, I want to look over the government's case. First, under their point of intentional communication, they talk about the idea of enslavement, killing us, or they would just take our world leaders hostage. Again, if they're able to come in these time span, as they said, if they're able to come within a significant reasonable time span to Earth, then they have such advanced technology that one, we couldn't detect them actually coming to us, and two, we couldn't interfere. Thus, once again, meaning that it's out of our control. That's a point we simply can't worry about because we can't change that, regardless of whether or not we message back. They said if we don't message back, that's more time to prepare. But in a later point, they themselves said that not messaging back may be the exact thing that leads to us dying. This is a self-contradictory point. Then about the idea of it causing world crafting chaos, they said that they would either leave or they would attack us for taking too long. But again, this is just ignoring the probability of non-hostile communications and just talking to each other. And they're assuming that everyone, and the fact is that they're just assuming that they're going to be hostile. The fact is that the government case simply falls on every single ground. Either it self-implodes on itself, or the actual probabilities of weighing hostileness versus peace just doesn't outweigh. It weighs in the favor of peace. For all these reasons, I urge you to vote negation.
Okay, hello. I am just going to do a quick off-time roadmap. So I'm going to be going over the negation case and then the affirmation case. Is everybody ready to go?
Yep.
All right, fantastic. I will be starting time now. So it seems like we are all good on framework, so I'll just go straight into the negation case. So their first contention is that they are either highly developed or already dead because of the amount of time it would take for us to send and receive communications, or for us to receive communications from them. However, they only, unlike our case, they only address a single eventuality in this contention. So they only address the idea that it would be an accidental communication, similar to what NASA sent in the 70s. So they are kind of assuming that situation, which means that we would still have years to prepare, or it would take, it was not an immediate message, so maybe they are already close by or something like that. So they are completely ignoring that eventuality. But I'll just go into the rest of the contention. So they argue that in thousands of years since they sent it, they are already all dead or highly developed. So they, in this case, they could act however they want, or they're all dead. And the losses that we are addressing in our contention would occur either way. However, I'd like to extend what my partner said in our first contention, which is that if we communicate with them, it is we are giving them more information about ourselves. In this situation, it gives us less time to prepare. If we send them our location, if it's an accidental communication, or we give them information about our structure or our leaders or hierarchical structure or organizational systems in any communication that we send back, we are giving them more information about us. And if they are a malicious group and want to take advantage of us, then that is going to lead much more securely to destruction and death. So on to their second contention, which is community support. So they argue that that we would need a really good reason to not do this because people want alien communications. First of all, given all, like, this is kind of a fiat because they're arguing that we need a really good reason to do this, but under the resolution, we have the ability to do this either way. So, and they don't really have any impacts here, like, so it doesn't really factor into the round in any way at all. So they just pretty much say that we need a good reason to do this, but that's a fiat. So next on to their third contention, which is that they argue that supranational organizations would want to work together and communicate better because they argue that we would want to work together. But considering the extreme advances in technology that these aliens could present if they are interested in working with us, it is not likely that they would that countries would want to work together, especially if it would give them such a huge technological advantage, and they feel like they could they could trade with the aliens better than other countries, or like they feel like they could get a leg up on other countries. Yes, question.
As your first speaker said in questioning, if it's going to take hundreds, if not thousands of years for interplanetary travel, how does that point of technology within a significant time span actually count?
What do you mean? Like currently if they have advanced technology, which you argue is a possibility, and they give us that advanced technology, it would mess up the current structure that we have. Even if it is years in the future, we're probably gonna, if we are still alive at that point, that means that we have a different organizational structure, and introducing new technology in a way that is not organic to the current structure would mess up that structure and create chaos, and probably create either extinction or death, especially if it has to do with mutually assured destruction. So additionally, like there's just not sufficient impacts here. Like if the conditions under the affirmation side is if the impacts there are extinction, death, enslavement of the human race, you have to outweigh that over any trade in technology that could occur, or the possibility that we would work together, which given our current state of nations is not a huge likelihood. So you just have to weigh what the affirmation is saying over what the negation is saying, because it does result in extinction. So onto their fourth contention, they argue that we only have a few years before climate change kills us, but I'm going to extend what my partner said here. If the deaths from climate change, or if extinction from climate change is only a few years away, and the negation is agreeing that it would take years for this communication to occur, that means that either we're dead at that point, or we are still alive, but the issue of climate change would have either killed us, or we would have solved it already, because communication would take that long. So they argue that this technology could help us in this situation, but once again, it does present a lot more harm, especially if climate change is away. Yes.
Okay, so the affirmative has multiple different advocacies on the duration of how long it would actually take to have communication and interaction with this alien force. Could you guys commit to one?
Yeah, so we can commit to the fact that it would take a significant amount of time, although we do think that it's difficult to be super specific about the amount of time it would take, because this is all it's all conjecture. Okay, so so in the situation where the communication would be thousands of years away, the climate change doesn't really factor in. So onto their fifth contention, they're arguing that the affirmation is being xenophobic. However, this isn't really accurate, because if you look at our actual contentions, in every single contention, we take in the eventualities that either the aliens are malicious or they are interested in trading with us. So we as the affirmation are just looking at every single possibility, because especially if they are more if they are significantly more technologically advanced than us, there's really no reason to believe other than goodwill that they would want to trade with us. So like it is important that we look at the eventuality that they are malicious in order to weigh all the impacts of this round. So next, I'm going to go over the affirmation side of the flow. So our first contention here is that about if it were intentional, and they are, and we have two parts of this. So if they are malicious, it would give them more opportunities to kill and take advantage of our leaders. It would give them more information about us, and by not responding, we simply are giving ourselves more time to prepare. And B, if they are interested in trading with us, then governments would be inclined to weaponize this technology. So they argue that once again, that they already have advanced technology, so we couldn't stop them. However, by not communicating, we're giving ourselves more time, especially if they don't know where we actually are. So by not giving them our location, we give ourselves more time to prepare for that situation, and also prepare leaders and government structures, etc. And then they don't really have an answer to subpoint B, like the escalation point. So that flows through this round. So, and then our second contention, which is worldcraft and chaos. So we argue that coordinating a prepared response will create chaos, which would cause them to either leave or attack. So they argue that we are ignoring the possibility of non-hostile behaviors, which is true for this contention, but it is important that we factor in hostile behaviors as well. And also in this contention as well, we are saying that if they come in peace, essentially, and we don't have a good response to them, it's likely that they will leave, which isn't necessarily a hostile behavior. It's just them working in their best interest. And they have no response to our third contention. So for these reasons, I urge you to vote for the affirmation. Thank you.
Okay. Can I get a little thumbs up from my judges, or just something, or nothing works? Just see if y'all are ready. Okay.
Yeah, we're ready.
Okay. So I'll begin my speech with a time of 8 minutes right now. So to start my speech, I'd like to go over the government's case and some of the things, and just kind of go over some of the things they've said. So their weighing mechanism is net benefits, and they go over in their entire case how all of these things, or they really go over how the aliens are going to just tear down the US. But in all of their examples given, they never truly give any kind of source. All that they give are opinionated based things. They just use opinionated based things. And most of these opinions are based in xenophobic tendencies, such as saying that these aliens, since they are not a part of our group, they're coming to tear us down. They're coming to do bad things, and they're coming to kill our leaders. And a direct quote from something that they said, the aliens will probably kill or enslave us. They have no reason for this tendency. They have no actual bounds as to why they're saying this about the aliens. So far, we have not made contact with any alien groups, so there's no reason to assume that they actually have bad tendencies or they want to kill us. For all we know, war might not even be a concept in the planet that they're from. But even on that case, let's get into some of the other points. So their first contention is basically on the point that we have unintentional or intentional communication. They're saying that the aliens probably have bad intentions, and that's why they're trying to intentionally communicate with us. They're saying that this is basically a Trojan horse, and they're trying to find a way into our civilization, and that by not responding, we're preventing them. But let's say that this is intentional communication, and by not responding, we're not doing anything, because they've obviously, if they're intentionally communicating with us, they already know where we are. So let's say that they are right. The aliens actually want to do something bad. They're going to come. But we have no reason in the first place to believe that the aliens would do anything bad. But also, why wouldn't we communicate with them and try to understand what is happening? It makes no sense to not communicate. The benefits outweigh the bad things that could happen. So on their next point, they say that we will weaponize this technology brought to us by the aliens. And they say that by having these world-ending weapons, that the world will just come to an end. The chaos will be unimaginable. But we already have nukes, as acknowledged by the first speaker. Nukes already exist. And so since we already have these weapons that are capable of ending the world, in fact, 7 times over, is it not reasonable to assume that just because these aliens bring this technology, that we're not actually going to use this technology to end the world? On that point?
Yeah, so we addressed this in our first speech. Like, wouldn't mutually assured destruction kind of go out the window if we see a huge and unknowable boost in technology, like that's unequal across the world?
So what we're trying to do is use more fact-based examples that are already given in the world, and we're just trying to look at examples of how things already work, and we're trying to apply that to today's case. And so I think it's reasonable to look at nuclear weapons as being an extreme form of technology. The amount of destruction you can cause with a nuclear weapon is absolutely outrageous. And in fact, there are enough nuclear weapons to end the world 7 times over. And these weapons are mainly owned by 2 nations, the US and Russia. That's sort of irrelevant. But what I'm getting into is that we have the ability to have these weapons that give us such an advantage, and we are not using them because it doesn't make any sense to. And so what we're trying to say is that if aliens were to bring this technology and it were to be weaponized, the weighing mechanism today is net benefits. And so we're saying that these weapons would not be used. And so it doesn't make any sense to say that the net benefits of not communicating because we are going to weaponize technology and use it makes no sense, because we're just simply not going to try to end the world. Like we said in one of our cases, or like they said, it would take a while to get off of this planet. And so it wouldn't make sense to destroy the one planet that we have just because we have this new technology. But even going into something else, getting into the other point, which is, say it's unintentional technology or unintentional communication. It makes, by responding, they're saying that we're telling the aliens where we are. And that's simply a bad thing, because then the aliens will have the ability to come enslave us and to come kill us. But again, like our fifth contention, this entire point is based in xenophobic bias. And so what we're saying is that just because these aliens communicate with us, they could be doing like Earth is, where we sent out a communication just trying to see who's out there. Because so far we've made contact with nobody. And so the aliens very easily could have good intentions, and there's no reason that we should bias trying to say that the aliens will do bad things to us. This is simply xenophobic and should not be in today's debate. And so getting back into our case, our first contention is that these aliens will either be highly developed or wiped out. And so what we're saying is that since the communications will take so long to actually reach Earth, we used the figure of about 1,000 years. It would make sense that since they had to send this communication over 1,000 years ago, and they were already at the ability to be able to send these communications, that they would have only had an exponential rise in the technology that they have. And so we could potentially benefit from this and be able to apply this technology for good, or ask them questions about how they've dealt with advancing their planet and how they've dealt with things like climate change, civil unrest, and other things. And so it makes sense to want to communicate with these people, assuming that they're already thousands of years ahead of us, and to learn from other people. And so our second contention is public support. It makes sense to communicate because it has public support. By not listening to the vast majority of people that want to communicate with aliens, should they communicate with us, we're only asking for civil unrest, because then the people are realizing that they do not have the ability to make decisions in the world. And so we also have better technology to support the people. And so the people are going to support wanting to communicate with aliens, because then this only allows people's lives to be easier. On our third point, this brings about a sense of unity. Whenever the world realizes that there's other people out in the universe, it will bring about a sense of unity, because we will want to come together as a planet Earth instead of being separated into countries and these smaller groups. And so this will only bring us together and want to work with these other groups. And so on our fourth point is the climate change point. And so what we're trying to say is that the world only can sustain life as it is right now for the next 7 years. We're not saying that the world will end in 7 years, but should something not change in these 7 years, we will have a situation that we cannot come back from. And so the thing that the reason that we're trying to communicate with aliens, and we think we should send something back should they communicate with us, is simply for the reason of they've already had to deal with these things, more than likely, considering the fact that their civilization is already 1,000 years ahead of us. And so we should try to communicate with these people and learn what we can from them. And so our fifth contention is simply xenophobia. The entire government's case is based around this bias that just because the aliens are not a part of the human group and they are different from us, that they have bad intentions and they want to hurt us. And so it makes almost all of their contentions are based around this idea that the aliens want to hurt us. And so for these reasons, I have to urge a vote for the affirmation, or for the negation.
All right. If I can just get some signal from everyone, that'd be greatly appreciated. All right. Yeah. I'll just assume my other two judges are also good, and I will just begin my first word. Once again, I am the leader of the opposition, Rayon Shuja. Name hasn't changed at all. And so in this speech, I'm just going to be going over the key contentions in today's case, and also maybe doing some impact calculus and looking at the voters and tying back to the actual resolution and to the weighing mechanism. So first of all, let's look at some of the key points of the government's case. First, let's establish that the government has stated during questioning that they believe that it's going to take at least 1,000 years for travel and or reverse communication. And so let's use that as a lens to look at all of their arguments and see why, as the previous speaker has already said, their arguments fall on the whole. First, the idea of killing us, enslaving us, or exploiting us for natural resources. Previous speaker has already responded to all these, but I'll reiterate it again. One, if they're stealing natural resources, they would do it for a near planet, not one for 1,000 years away. If they're trying to kill us or enslave us, if they have the technology to travel so far, they can just clone people themselves or just make their own race of people, as we on Earth already have the technology to do in the 21st century. If they want to kill us, then the probability of that is outweighed by the much greater benefit of them being beneficial to our people, whether that be helping the climate or, as an additional example, giving us the technology to help fix things such as MS, such as ALS, such as Alzheimer's, such as dementia, AIDS, all these things that we have problems that we don't know how to fix. They could have the technology to fix. They only harp on the idea of death, destruction, despair, everything going wrong. And yet that isn't the lens through which the opposition believes that we should look through things. Because as I said in my own speech, and my previous speaker reiterated, if they even have the ability to approach the stars, if they're a warmongering, non-peaceful race, they would have already killed themselves amongst themselves. They would have had, with their own technology, would have caused their own destruction. A non-peaceful race that can't cooperate isn't going to get into the stars. And so looking at the actual probability of a violent race getting into the star is a minuscule probability that is completely outweighed by the potential benefits that we have outlined. On the scale of net benefits, we on side opposition have the greater benefits. We prevent civil unrest. We have better communication with a civilization. We take a proactive approach in something where we don't even have in the probability. And then they wanted to shift the conversation to the idea of it being unintentional. But as the previous speaker said, and they themselves said, NASA has already sent out similar communication signals. Those signals are already going out into the world. They're already going out into the expanding universe. So they can't argue the idea of not sending out signals, because they're going to find us irregardless, whether this is intentional or not, because we've already sent out those signals. Their point about the idea of us not sending signals equals them not knowing where we are simply falls flat on their own point that NASA themselves has sent it out. Now, let's actually look at the actual voters. First, we have weighing the possibility of enslavement or exploitation versus the possibility of fixing the environment, fixing MS, fixing Alzheimer's, fixing dementia. Their point about death, destruction, and chaos is a minuscule point. One, I've already talked about how if it was for resources, they'd go to a closer planet. If it was for people, they could have the technology with stem cell technology to make their own. If it was for the idea of, if it was just for the idea of killing people for the sake of it, that is a warmongering people in their essence. The fact is that such a civilization isn't likely to actually reach the stars. And yet we have the benefits, that much greater magnitude, much greater probability they come in peace, that they come at least amicably, unless we are the ones who enrage them. Those are the ones that who are doing it. Things such as climate change, it's not going to end us. We're just kicking the can down the road. The problem is that the universe is a lonely place. Don't make that even lonelier. Negate.
All right, so I'm going to get a timer set up. Quick off-time roadmap. I'm going to go over two big voters that encompass the entirety of debate to show you why this is going to be a clear F vote. Is anybody not ready? All right, my time starts now. So there are two big things you have to look at when you're trying to decide the winner of this round, judges. First, on the xenophobia argument that our opponents basically collapse to, that is inherently not true, as my partner said, and as I will reiterate right now. And secondly, this point, or just basically weighing on the fact that our opponents have no impacts throughout this round, as my partner has already stated. So first on xenophobia, our opponents continue to call it xenophobes throughout this entire debate, basically as a warrant to their basically just cross-applying their fifth contention throughout the entirety of the debate. However, if you look closely, the only way that they're able to link this to our case is by dropping half of our case. So like they basically neglect half of our case. So each of our contentions focuses on if the aliens are hostile and if the aliens are not hostile. They neglect the second one. So if you look at our first contention, we have two eventualities. One, aliens are hostile and they take over the world. That's what they focus on and call us xenophobes on. However, we also focus on if the aliens are good. Then you see this big argument of nuke war and the fact that mutually assured destruction goes out the window, which they just dropped, and as my partner flowed through. Then you look at, so basically they dropped our contention one subpoint B, which shows which has big impacts of nuke war that outweighs basically their entire case, especially when they have no impacts, as I will go into later. Secondly, they drop our the crafting chaos argument on if the aliens leave, there's not even potential for good. There's not even like any potential for good. They drop that. They just say what if they only focus on that part of the contention where we talk about what if the aliens are bad. These are two different eventualities, and as they conceded, and as both sides agree on, we don't know what these aliens are going to do or what their society looks like or how the aliens operate. So there's really no way to actually see or like to see whether or not they will be good or bad, hostile or peaceful. So we have to look at both. Our opponents only look at one, and then when we look at both, they call us xenophobes. So again, there's no potential for good under our second contention, which they dropped. So you can flow that through as well as a big impact in this round that they're getting rid of potential for, or that there's like really just no potential for good under that argument. Third, they drop our trade fights argument in our third contention, which is big because basically saying that if the aliens are good and want to trade with us, individual countries, as my partner has said and applied to the rest of the round, basically will just try to trade with the aliens individually instead of as like the world as a whole. And then we just see everybody fighting for trade with aliens as they take our fighting for trade with aliens. And then we just see everybody all countries fighting with each other, no cooperation seen. All countries just want more and more resources from aliens, which, as we've already pointed out, is not a great thing because when the aliens give us our technology, we weaponize it. There's nuke war. Everybody dies. Biggest impact of the round. So they also drop the entirety of our third contention, which is a big thing too, because in that third contention, it doesn't just encompass the impacts I went over. It encompasses global trade fights and nuke war because we take technology and then we weaponize it and then we fight each other with it, and the potential for enslavement of the human race, which is a big argument that they basically just neglect, and the only response to it throughout this entire round is calling us xenophobes. So like these are all different points, and they're all points that our opponents drop. They're all big impacts in the round that outweigh their entire case, as I will go into now. So our second voter is weighing, so we're going to be going over the negation case. So our opponents basically have no impacts. You can flow everything that my partner said, where she tried to weigh impacts on their case, impacts that are basically non-existent. So let's just go through each of their contentions really quickly. So in their first contention, they say there's no point not to respond to the aliens. As we've said, and as they've dropped, there clearly is where there's global trade fights, technology being weaponized, so basically nuke war, no more mutually assured destruction, and there's like potential for enslavement. There's really no reason why we should respond, and as they basically just drop. The second contention is fiated, and their only impact is that like the British sent out a survey a few years ago that says that people want to talk with aliens, but again, that's a fiat because they can't just say we want to talk with aliens. There's no reason the AF can deny it or deny people's rights to. Third, it just points out the timeline of talking with aliens. Like there's no real impacts here, or like their third contention does that. Their fourth contention, they talk about climate change solvency, but as I'll flow through, my partner correctly stated here that with the significant time it takes to communicate with aliens, we either solve climate change or die by the time that we even get communications back to the aliens, or if we talk with the aliens enough to be able to like move as they suggested all the populace of Earth to another planet to survive. And then the fifth contention is xenophobia, but as we've already stated, it's unwarranted. It's basically a warrant to just drop half of our entire case. So if we look at the big picture in the round here, we see that there's big impacts of global trade fighting, nuke war, or enslavement on the affirmation case. There's nothing coming out of the negation besides no impacts and wrongful accusations of xenophobia, and that's why you're going to be voting in favor of the affirmation today.
All right, cool. So the decision is in. I guess I'll go ahead and read it, so it doesn't really matter that much. In this round, it is a 2-0 decision for the opposition. So Mira, would you like to go first? Do you want me to go first? Do you care?
I have no preference. If you want to go first, I can go after.
All right, cool. I guess I will go first then. So this round was actually really hard for me to evaluate, I think, because there was like not a lot of impacting, not a lot of weighing, and like everything was in a very hypothetical realm, so it's very hard to like figure out, like to truth test any of it, to figure out exactly where to vote and to figure out what arguments I buy. So with that said, I think what I went for is I just kind of defaulted to warranting a little bit. And so I thought that like the neg case seemed like better warranted. There was like some past precedent of how like the world interacts with weapons, how long it would take for communications. And I think that this like time frame argument was actually a major takeout to the AF impacts. So after the AF conceded that it would take like 1,000 years, I think it became really hard for me to vote for the affirmative. So yeah. That said, it was a really, really hard decision for me to make, and I think it very easily could have gone either way. It's just this is how like my judging preferences came down on this round this time. Yeah.
I echo a lot of the sentiments that Camille has in terms of it being a pretty hard round to evaluate from a standpoint where like I want to intervene as little as possible. But given that there's not that much impacting or weighing done at all, I just kind of have to extrapolate warrants. I guess I can just read out like the reason for decision that was shared with both teams. Basically, I buy the argument that NASA's signals out into the universe means that aliens will eventually know where we are, or they already know, meaning that not responding to alien communications doesn't actually maintain human anonymity, which is a large reason out of AF for why we shouldn't respond. Because of this, the only option is to consider whether or not intentional communication from aliens is malicious or curious. The AF is unable to warrant the probability of communication resulting in large-scale conflict. AF tries to defend that mutually assured destruction does not resolve in a scenario where there's severe unequal access to weaponry across the globe, but Neg contends that we already have unbalanced access to nukes, which could end the world 7 times over. Therefore, alien technology would likely not cause the end of the human race. After being flagged as xenophobic, AF claims that they have considered the option that aliens will come to Earth peacefully and with no malicious intent. However, I do buy the Neg argument that AF actually believes that there will be adverse impacts regardless of the intent. Even in a peaceful situation, AF believes that the tech that the aliens bring to Earth will be weaponized, used poorly. Neg does a fairly good job of clarifying that if aliens were truly a violent group, by the time they received communications from humans, they would have already perished due to infighting if they were in fact violent. On the issue of time frame, I lead Neg on the articulation that aliens will be likely technologically advanced enough that they can assist in solving climate change and civil unrest. I think this is pretty tenuous, but this is kind of the easiest place for me to vote. I vote neg on the risk that aliens may help resolve the existential issues faced by humans in the status quo, and the transfer of tech is probably net good. Again, I think this probably could have gone either way had warrants been put in different places and or had weighing been done by one team or the other. But it's just, this is kind of how it shook out in my head and on my flow. Overall, I think valiant effort. This was not, maybe the topic everyone was expecting. So I think it was a pretty good job given the circumstances. Good luck on the rest of your rounds. If you have any questions, I guess I'm happy to answer some questions now, but also I think they're going to be pushing the next round fairly soon. So I'm also happy to respond to Discord messages if y'all have very specific questions for me. I guess Camille, if you have different preferences, please.
No, I'm good. If you guys want to ask questions now or Discord us, either is fine. If you have any questions.
No, I think we're good, but thank you. This was
Thank
a cool
you.
round.
Yeah, same here. Thank you guys for the round. Thank you guys for judging.
Thank you.
See you.